Welcome back. It's now time for business. Matthew Warren is with me in the studio. Hello to you, Matthew.
Hello,
so let's talk about the big meetings going on in Washington this week. Two of the world's most important financial institutions have been meeting there.
That's right. This is the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. They are having their spring meetings today and over the weekend in Washington. These are really a powwow of the great and the good from the economic world. Bank chiefs, finance ministers are all converging on Washington. Now, yesterday, the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, kicked off proceedings. She was talking in particular about the bailout fund of $400 billion that she's hoping to put together over the weekend. Winnie Andrews has this report.
Boosting funding to meet potential demand for emergency loans. IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde says the crisis fund isn't needed now, but could help the EU get through troubled skies that may lie ahead.
We are seeing a light recovery blowing in a spring wind, but we're also seeing some very dark clouds on the horizon, which is another way to tell you that there is a bit of a recovery, timid, and a fragile situation with still high risks.
The IMF is looking to increase its firewall by $400 billion and has already lured in promises for $320 billion. The European Union has pledged $200 billion and Japan $60. But the IMF is meeting resistance from the U.S., who says it won't contribute money to the fund, and BRIC countries like Brazil and China, who have not yet made commitments. The attempt to increase the IMF's lending capacity comes as concerns over Spain are on the rise, with some fearing it could be the next country to seek a bailout. Christine Lagarde is encouraging countries to act now.
If we had a message to Europe, and the Eurozone in particular, it would be keep up for better and more Europe. Keep up means implement the reforms that have taken place.
In meetings over the weekend, Lagarde will do some diplomatic arm twisting, trying to convince countries that still haven't committed to the fund to do so.
Light recovery blowing in a spring wind, says Christine Lagarde. How do the markets feel about it?
Almost poetic, isn't it?
Very much so.
Well, the markets are a bit mixed actually today. There's been quite a lot of economic news. We had jobless claims in the US. These are weekly figures that come out. They came in yesterday slightly lower than last week, but a bit higher than the markets had hoped for. Also, Spain and France were both in the bond markets yesterday raising money. Now, the Spanish in particular was looked at very closely, and we can see that they got those bonds away, but both Spain and France paying slightly higher rates than they have paid in the past. And that reflects nervousness, which we see flowing through into the markets as well. We can take a look at Asia. Asian markets are still open, and most of those, with the exception of Shanghai, are in negative territory. Some stocks taking a bit of a pounding there. And over in the US, we had also markets closing in negative territory yesterday based on those worries about Europe, and not such great figures as we've been seeing perhaps in the past on joblessness.
Quite a bit of red on those graphics there. Now let's pick up on a few more of the day's business stories. Microsoft reported record revenues for the first quarter. Its net profits were just above $5 billion in results that beat Wall Street's expectations. Sales were up in the market for business software, while demand for the company's Xbox video games fell sharply.
Shareholders have won a battle to impose tighter rules on executive pay at Barclays. The British bank's CEO and finance director will now see half their bonus payments dependent on tougher financial measures. Barclays said the strength of opinion expressed by shareholders had led to the change.
In Japan, Olympus shareholders have voted to approve a new slate of directors. A group of rebels led by ousted chief executive Michael Woodford voted against the nominations. They argue that a shake-up is needed for the company to move beyond last year's accounting scandal. Woodford says he will try to have the results annulled after management failed to answer a question about why he was fired.
Now, over in Italy, the economic crisis and an unemployment rate of over 9% has created a tragic phenomenon. The rate of suicides linked to business and money problems has soared. The Prime Minister himself, Mario Monti, has spoken of the high human cost of the economic crisis. This report from Mark Edwards.
Paying solemn tribute. Roughly 1,000 people made their way to the Pantheon in Rome. They came to protest silently against the raft of suicides brought on by the financial crisis. A suicide rate which is only getting higher. 23 already since the start of the year, 187 in 2010, twice as many as in 2004.
We noticed an increase of people that are in crisis for the economic situations, and they have been sending emails or come here for an appointment and to have some support.
These suicides have mostly come from within the world of SMEs, who dominate 9/10 of the Italian economy. Cash flow is the issue. Owners have found themselves suffocated by the hike in interest rates and the lack of available credit. This woman lost her 28-year-old son. He committed suicide, unable to face the consequences of the bar he'd purchased going bankrupt.
I think that one enters into a vicious circle, so that all of one's life focuses around this problem of work difficulties. I understand the people that commit suicide, because I lived through it, unfortunately, and I want to scream about it.
Italy is not the only country in Europe to be confronted by this wave of financial crisis suicides. Earlier this month, the suicide of a pharmacist in Greece caused a public outpouring of emotion.
A tragic phenomenon in Italy there. Now let's move to the next phase in Britain's phone hacking scandal. News Corp boss Rupert Murdoch even and his son James appearing before a British investigation into press ethics next week.
Now you might remember that last year actually both Rupert Murdoch and his son appeared in front of a parliamentary inquiry, and that's pictures of them when they were doing it last autumn. Now they've been called to appear in front of the Leveson inquiry. Now this is another special inquiry set up with a judge that's looking specifically into the issue of press ethics, and this was all sparked, of course, by a story in the News of the World, which is now defunct, in which it was revealed afterwards that the newspaper had been eavesdropping on phone calls of a murdered schoolgirl. So this has been a very big issue. So Rupert Murdoch, they will appear separately this time on different days. They will appear on their own in front of this judge to answer more questions about what happened. Not welcome news really for News Corp.
Well, of course, that newspaper was essentially relaunched, wasn't it, in the form of the Sun on Sunday?
Exactly, it was closed down, and then absolutely they've just taken their Sun title and launched that on Sunday instead.
He has a tendency to bounce back, doesn't he, Rupert Murdoch? Now, ratings agencies are used to passing judgments on countries and on companies, but it looks as if they might be getting a taste of their own medicine, Matthew.
Yes. Now, this is a case of you're fired, actually, for the biggest of the three main rating agencies. This is Moody's. The way these agencies work is that they provide these services to companies and to banks. The companies and the banks pay them effectively to give their analysis of their credit worthiness, and then investors can then use that to make their own judgments. Now, two Danish banks have decided after talking to their investors that in fact they don't need the ratings agency opinion anymore. These two banks are Nykredit and Danske Bank. Not sure how good my Danish pronunciation is there. They have already decided to drop Moody's, and a third bank, Jyske Bank, is saying that it's also looking at ending its relationship with the ratings agency.
But maybe they just didn't like what they were hearing.
Well, of course, there's always the shoot the messenger, analogy here, isn't there? Perhaps because Moody's had given some bad news actually about the mortgage bond industry in Denmark, which is very, very big. But nevertheless, it sets some kind of precedent potentially that perhaps the agencies aren't always essential to the business of these companies and banks.
Thank you very much for all of that. Matthew Warren from our business desk. Do stay with us here on France 24. Louise Hannah with the headlines next. Bye-bye.